I see we are not in a quorum call, and I was planning to speak in a few minutes, but in the news, things have been filed now appropriately. Let me speak in my role, not only as the senator from Vermont, but as the vice chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. We've had months of delay, painstaking negotiations. Sometimes those negotiations have gone all weekend long to midnight, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. But this afternoon, we have before us a spending package. It includes all 12 appropriations bills for fiscal year 2021. It also includes a vitally important COVID relief package. Those are the numbers, the figures, but let's tell you what it means. It provides funding for programs that are critically important to the American people. And I'd like to see it swiftly passed on the President's desk. After all, it's not like we're suddenly rushing things. We're 2 months and 20 days into the fiscal year. It'd be absolutely outrageous if we delayed further. Now, as Vice Chairman of the Appropriations Committee, I worked hard to reach agreement on this Omnibus Appropriations bill. They'll fund the federal government through the remainder of the fiscal year without relying on a long-term continuing resolution, as has sometimes been done in the past. That was not an easy task. The budget caps were very lean this year, and we had to stay within those. They provided a less than 1% increase in non-defense discretionary spending, and that's to meet the needs of a nation that's reeling from the worst public health pandemic in a century. Now, under normal circumstances, that would be difficult. But it's made even more difficult because of the global health and economic crisis we face. But notwithstanding that tight top line, we produced a bill that provides important increases in programs that serve the American people and invest in our economy. And I think Bill finally drives a stake through the heart of the administration's effort to substantially diminish the role of government in helping Americans in need and in promoting economic growth. Now, we all know that President Trump's first budget proposed to substantially diminish the role of government. He wanted to cut non-defense spending by 9% in fiscal 2018, 18% by 2021. He wanted to completely eliminate programs millions of Americans rely on every day. For 4 years, Congress, leading Republicans and Democrats, came together, and we rejected these ill-conceived, arbitrary, and reckless cuts. And this year, I'll say to my colleagues, those who worked hard with us on the Democratic side, the Republican side, who came together on this, those especially who worked hard with us in the Appropriations Committee, we're going to do the same in rejecting these arbitrary cuts. Now, this agreement is a product of weeks of hard work and compromise. It's not the bill I would have written on my own. It includes things I support, and I must admit some things I oppose. But that's often the way legislation is. No one senator gets everything that he or she wants. But together, we can get things that the country wants. An unbalanced passage of this bill is unquestionably in the interest of the American people. Let me talk about some of the things. The Omnibus spending bill includes increases for education and early childhood programs. It provides more funding for substance abuse and mental health services. And I think every one of us know from what we hear from back home, These services are of utmost importance in these extremely difficult times. It provides more for food assistance programs, both here and abroad. Assistance is desperately needed as many families struggle to survive during this pandemic. And it includes increases for housing and homelessness services to help those that are the most vulnerable. These are all programs that my fellow Democrats fought hard to include. Now, I support this agreement. As I said, I appreciate those who have worked with us, weekends, holidays, after midnight so many nights, but I'm deeply disappointed that the Congress is so unforgivably late in completing our work. There is absolutely no reason whatsoever why this bill could not have been finished months ago. Now, I thank Chairman Shelby and Chairwoman Loy and Ranking Member Granger for their cooperation and partnership. We worked through our differences on the Omnibus spending bill. As a Big Four, we realized we had to balance the needs and requests of all our members. I urge all members to support it. As for the Omnibus, now before us today is the much delayed COVID relief package. It too is the product of bipartisan compromise. And while it falls short in some critical areas, I support the agreement. It's also long overdue. The American people have been waiting for help for far too long. And I worry that our Republican leadership took a wait-and-see approach. We were ready to go on this way last summer, but for 270 days, Majority Leader McConnell and the Senate Republicans have blocked every reasonable effort to provide desperately needed relief, even as members of their party said quietly, "We wish we could do something." Now, this package is far from perfect, but time is not on our side. We cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Let's look at what the good things are in here. It provides much-needed investments in our economy with support for small businesses. Small businesses like those in my state of Vermont or those in the state of the presiding officer or anybody else here. It provides relief for unemployed workers by extending unemployment benefits into March. It makes investments in vaccine production and distribution. It supports health providers and educators and farmers and transportation providers. It provides critical investments to expand broadband in rural and low-income areas, access which is vitally important in these difficult times when many schools and many businesses are operating remotely. It includes another round of direct payments to millions of Americans who are still struggling to pay their mortgage or their rent and feed their families and heat their homes and meet their monthly obligations. Many can't do all those things. Now they'll at least get help. And I urge that this bill also includes $4 billion in emergency funding for the Gavi Alliance. Let me explain that. And I appreciate those senators who supported me on that money, the emergency funding for Gavi. This is for the procurement and delivery of vaccines to countries around the world whose rudimentary public health systems are being overwhelmed by COVID-19, whose economies are in free fall due to the virus. We cannot defeat this global pandemic, and international travel and commerce will not recover without fighting the virus overseas. Just as we did during the Obama administration. We were faced with Ebola. The administration and the Congress came together and said, sure, we'll protect here in the United States, but we'll also work at getting rid of it in other countries, because if it flourishes in another country, it's an airplane trip away from our country. So I support the package, but I want to be very clear. This COVID bill is only a first step. We have to do more. Vermonters and the American people need more. The direct payments included in this package are a fraction of what we should have provided, given the dire financial situation of millions of people across this nation. People are hungry. Unemployment continues to plague our economies. We should have acted months ago. But let's at least act on this today. Families are struggling to pay their rent and put food on their table. I'll continue to fight for more. I've made hundreds of phone calls around my own state of Vermont. I've talked to people that I've never met, but I know that there are people who are typical of Vermonters, but they'd be typical of people in any one of the states we represent. And I hear the fear in their voice. I hear the concern they have. In the middle of the winter, as snow is coming down, do we heat or do we eat? How many meals should we as parents go without so we can make sure our children are fed? How are our children going to go do school if they're hungry? And I look at state and local governments. Around the country, they've laid off over 1,300,000 teachers, first responders, and other employees since March. They need our help. And sometimes things we don't talk about. Rates of spousal abuse and child abuse have increased during the crisis. We should be providing funds for the Violence Against Women Act and child abuse prevention grants. Just as Republicans and Democrats joined me a few years ago when I greatly expanded, with the help of Senator Mike Crapo, in a bipartisan fashion, the Violence Against Women Act and the things we did. And none of us, even at that time, could have conceived of the crises we're facing now in the country. In my state, Vermonters are facing the coldest, darkest months of winter. They're struggling to heat their homes. Their families need help paying their utility bills through the LIHEAP program, and we'll help that program. You know, when it's 20 degrees below zero, and you've had 15 inches of snow overnight, you can't really look at this as an abstract thing and say, golly, maybe we should have a program to heat our home. You're going to die if you don't. And we're finally making progress in delivering a vaccine to the American people, but the pandemic is far from over. We know that notwithstanding a lot of the things said about this is on its way, everybody's going to get one, there are huge gaps in all parts of our country in getting the virus to them. And I'll be the first at the negotiating table to work with President Biden and the 117th Congress to address the many needs that remain unmet in this bill. Now, the House will send this bill over to us. I would urge all members to vote aye when it comes here. Again, I have to look back at the history of this body. I have to look at the people who have worked so hard on so many things over the years. And I know that we have people in both parties that try to address the needs of our country. And I don't say this with pleasure, but with sadness. I'm the Dean of the United States Senate. Next year, I'll start my 47th year in this body. I've seen us come together at a time when it's needed. But then I've seen one of the greatest needs I've seen in my years in the Senate that we ignored for month after month after month. All of this could have been done in July or August or September or October or November, not the very last minute. And why didn't we? We had to take time. We had to take time breaking all tradition, all the promises that have been given by the other side. We had to take time to move one special interest supported judge after another to lifetime jobs where they'll be paid well. They don't have to worry about paying their bills. In all 50 of our states, we had people who were being tossed out of their homes, tossed out of their apartments, lost their jobs, unable to feed their children, with the fear and the anxiety a parent has in telling a child, no, I don't know what tomorrow will be like. I don't know what next month will be like. We'll pray and we'll hope, but I don't know. You know, we could have stopped that anxiety in June when the House bill came over here, or in July, or in August, or in September, or in October, or November. We're doing some of it now. But I'd ask every senator to search their conscience. Wouldn't it have been better if all of us on both sides had stood up and said, put everything else aside. Put aside all the special interest nominations. Put that aside. And let's care for the one special interest we should have. That's the American people. Care for those men and women who elected us at either party, who rely on us. I've never seen this country so split apart, or having such fear, except for a privileged few, and maybe that includes us. Well, I'm not here to represent me. I'm here to represent over 600,000 Vermonters, and to fulfill my oath to the whole country, 320 million Americans. And what we should be doing is saying, never again will we let these kind of partisan politics slow up and not allow us to go forward. We know, and it's easy to say now, we should have taken the bill that came from the House of Representatives last summer, brought up on the floor. Anybody didn't like it, filed an amendment to change it. Vote for it, vote against it. Vote for or against the amendments you might bring up. That's what we usually do. I know how to vote. I voted over 16,000 times. Why don't we just vote? If we had done that this summer, it may not be a perfect bill, but it would be better than where we are. Every member, Republican, Democratic alike, would have had a chance to bring up their amendment. They could have made their case. They either win or they lose. We'd go to the committee conference, we'd have the bill done. I say all this not to just be a technocrat on what needs to be done, but to say, this is how you reflect the needs of the American people. When we faced the threat of Ebola in the last administration, we stood together, both parties. We helped the countries that were suffering from Ebola, and in doing so, we protected the United States of America, and we helped those in this country that might face it. That was a shining moment. That was a moment of America at its best. This is not. I do hope we can do better next year. I know as a senior Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, I will fight to do better. But I also use what voice and what example I might give as Dean of the Senate to say to both parties, Here's what we do. I think of such examples when Bob Dole, one of the best leaders this Senate had, a Republican, came together with Senator Pat Moynihan, one of the most brilliant senators I've served with, a Democrat. And that Republican Democrat came together, set aside their philosophical differences, cared for the country, and saved Social Security. I could give so many more examples. But that's when the Senate acted as the conscience of the nation. And how did it do that? It appealed to our conscience. I just use that one example because people said they couldn't possibly do the things, difficult things necessary to save Social Security. Democrats wouldn't give this and Republicans wouldn't give that. And instead you had two senators of conscience said, we can do it. Let's do it. And then let's use our leadership and our conscience to bring others together. And that distinguished Republican, Senator Robert Dole, that distinguished Democrat, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, came together and we saved Social Security. And those of us in the Senate in both parties who voted for the final package knew we were going to have to vote for some things that would be unpopular with constituencies. But instead of worrying about special interests or single issue constituencies, we worried about the men and women of our states and what they would face if we didn't come together. And that's what we voted for, and we saved it. And I sometimes say that senators are merely constitutional impediments to their staffs, but we could not do the work we do without the staff. And I want to thank the staff who worked tirelessly to produce the bill. And by tirelessly, I mean till after midnight many nights and weekends and holidays. And when the rest of the Senate had gone home, they were still working. I know, because much of that time, I'd be on the phone with them, I'd be working with them, and finally I'd say, it's so late at night, everybody should go to bed. And when I woke up in the morning, there'd be a memo sent to me at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning, because they kept on working. So I thank Chuck Kiefer, Shannon Paterni, Jessica Berry, Diane Neller, Jean Tolleisen, Eric Raven, Doug Clapp, Ellen Murray, Scott Nance, Rachel Taylor, Alex Keenan, Michelle Dominiquez, Tim Reeser, Dabney Haig, and all the staff of the Senate Appropriations Committee on both bills. And I would thank Chairman Shelby's staff, Shannon Hines, Jonathan Graffield, and David Atkins. Normally, senators at this time might put these names just in the record. I wanted to say them out loud on the floor because they should hear their names said out loud and know how much I appreciate what they've done, not just for the United States Senate, but for the United States of America. Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.